I'm ready, Mr. Chairman.
Well, now that you are here, we will proceed. There's a thought. Good morning. I'm David Barish, Chairman of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. Before we begin, as always, I'll ask you all to put your electronic devices on silent. With us today, George Augusto, representing Russell Redding, Secretary of Agriculture, Jen Langen, representing Joe Torsella, State Treasurer, and Robert Coyne, representing Secretary of Revenue, Dan Hassel. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Quorum of the board being present, I'll call proceedings to order. First order of business, the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
By way of announcements, the board held an executive session yesterday on July 11th to conduct quasi-judicial deliberations relating to matters being considered by the board today. Next, we have consideration of a motion to approve the minutes and transcript of the April 26th and May 17th meetings. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the minutes and transcripts of the April 26th and May 17, 2017 meetings.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Under new business, we'll hear from Doug Sherman.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Our first agenda item relates to Final Regulation 125-189, and that pertains to hybrid gaming tables and electronic wagering systems, or electronic wagering terminals. The rulemaking will transition the regulation from into the final form, adding the new game technology, hybrid gaming tables, to the complement of table games available for play in the Commonwealth. Hybrid gaming tables are tables that combine live dealer action with fully automated electronic wagering. The dealer conducts the game on a physical table referred to as the hybrid table, and then there are separate electronic wagering terminals located apart from the table, and players make their wagers and monitor the game being dealt from those terminals. All wagering, recordation of wins and losses, as well as the printing of gaming vouchers occur at the electronic wagering terminal. The rulemaking will incorporate the new technology into the existing board regulations on device testing, internal controls, table game taxes, and the provisions associated with electronic gaming tables. The new gaming system will be connected to the Department of Revenue's Central Control Computer System, and that acts as the system of recordation of taxes due. With that explanation, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but otherwise ask for a motion to approve.
Thank you, Doug. Are there any questions from the board or ex officio members? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue an order to adopt the final regulation number 125-189 as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, we have 4 petitions for your consideration. Each of the matters can be decided on the record by agreement of the parties. In each of these matters, the board has, in advance of this meeting, been provided with all documents filed of record as of today. The first petition, I believe this individual may be present, and he should come forward if he'd like to briefly address the board. This matter is of Robert Marcinico, and it's the Office of Enforcement Counsel's request to place Mr. Marcinico on the involuntary exclusion list. The uncontested facts in the matter show that on October 8, 2016, Mr. Marcinico was pinching and pass posting bets while playing craps at Sands Bethworks Casino, thereby unlawfully winning $325. Mr. Marcinico was criminally charged and subsequently entered a 6-month ARD program on April 26, 2017. In February 2017, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a complaint to place Mr. Marcinico on the involuntary exclusion list. After requesting a hearing, Mr. Marcinico subsequently decided to waive his right to a hearing and have the board decide the matter based upon the documents That's the matter that's now ready for the board's consideration. As stated, Mr. Marcinico has come to the meeting today.
Thank you, Board.
Wish to say something?
Yeah, I just wish to
One-
say,
Stand and please be sworn.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this morning will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
yes.
Thank you. You can proceed.
I just wanted to say that I was charged with the 11 counts. I have entered ARD. I have paid my ARD, my restitution in full, and that I'll be off. I guess the charges will be expunged on October 26th. I fully apologize for my actions, and I would like to be considered not to be permanently banned from the casinos in Pennsylvania.
Are there questions from the board on this matter? Do you have any response, or should I proceed?
You can proceed with the motion.
Okay.
Just one more
Yes,
thing.
sir.
I have absolutely no record at all. I probably haven't had a parking ticket in 20 years.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant the Office of Enforcement Counsel's petition to place Robert Marcinko on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted. Thank you.
The next matter is that of Bunzl Mid-Atlantic's petition for removal from the board's prohibited gaming service provider list. Bunzl Mid-Atlantic supplies a range of products that include food packaging, disposable supplies, and cleaning and safety products. Bunzl filed a certified gaming service provider application with the board in January 2007. While its application was under review, it provided services to several Pennsylvania casinos, receiving over $690,000 in compensation. In March 2009, Bunzl was placed on the board's prohibited gaming service provider list for failure to cure deficiencies in its application. Bunzl Distribution has now filed a request for removal from the prohibited gaming service provider list. The Office of Enforcement Counsel does not object to Bunzl being removed from the list so long as it pays a $1,500 civil penalty and files a complete application package with the board. The matter is now appropriate for the board's consideration.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Bunzl Mid-Atlantic LLC's petition to be removed from the prohibited gaming service provider list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel, the Office of Chief Counsel, and subject to a $1,500 civil penalty as requested by Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next petition before the board is that of Eastern Lift Truck Company, which also seeks removal from the board's prohibited gaming service provider list. In July 2010, Eastern Lift Truck Company was placed on the prohibited gaming service provider list after failing to provide the board with information required to complete its application. Specifically, the president of the company at that time informed the Bureau of Licensing of his concerns about providing personal information needed to complete the application process. The individual indicated at that time that if personal information of himself was needed, he did not want to complete the process and wanted to withdraw. Nonetheless, as a result of his failure to move forward with providing the requested information, Eastern Lift Truck was placed on the prohibited GSP list. Eastern Lift Truck's former president has passed away, and the company is now requesting removal from the list so that they can begin the registration application process anew and conduct business with Pennsylvania casinos. The Office of Enforcement Counsel does not object to Eastern Lift Truck being removed from the prohibited gaming service provider list and requests that they submit a complete application and pay all associated fees with the application as well as a $1,500 civil penalty, and that's the request before the board.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Eastern Lift Truck Company, Inc.'s petition to be removed from the prohibited gaming service provider list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel. However, Eastern Lift Truck Company should not be assessed a $1,500 civil penalty.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion as modified is adopted.
The next petition
Let
before...
me clarify that. The motion is not modified. The recommendation is modified by the motion. Thank you.
The next petition before the board is Pasang Sherpa's request to lift the suspension of his gaming employee permit. By way of background, Mr. Sherpa was issued a gaming employee occupation permit in April 2013 to work as a table game dealer at Presque Isle Downs. On August 2nd, 2016, an emergency suspension of Mr. Sherpa's gaming permit was issued by the executive director as requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel after counsel learned that Mr. Sherpa had been charged with several criminal offenses, including one felony account. Specifically, after being arrested on a DUI charge upon the police returning him to his residence, Mr. Sherpa became combative with police and struggled, leading to a state police trooper sustaining an injury. A hearing on the validity of the emergency suspension was held in October 2016, and on January 1st, 2017, the board ordered Mr. Sherpa's emergency suspension remain in effect pending the outcome of the criminal charges. In April of this year, Mr. Sherpa filed a motion requesting that the suspension be lifted as the felony aggravated assault count, which was the reason for the emergency suspension, had been dropped. OEC initially objected to the request, and a hearing was held on June 8th, 2017. After hearing from Mr. Sherpa and his counsel at that hearing, OEC withdrew its objection to Mr. Sherpa's suspension being lifted, and it's now that request to lift the suspension, which is before the board. I indicate Mr. Sherpa is also present today.
Mr. Sherpa, if you'd like to address, would you please stand? Be sworn in by the court reporter.
Raise your right hand, please. Swear affirm the testimony you're about to give this morning will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You can go ahead.
If you'd like to say anything to the board, this is your opportunity.
You can sit. You don't have to stand. It's fine.
Sit, but lean into it.
Actually, I have nothing to say, but thank you.
Your voice up. We can't hear you.
Sit, have a seat, and slide over.
Actually, I have nothing to say, but thank you for the opportunity. So, this was nothing. I don't know.
We can't hear. We can't hear. You have to lean forward. Have him lean forward, Doug.
What I have to speak.
Have him lean forward, please.
Just lean and try to keep your voice up and lean in so they can hear what you just said.
So, what I have to say, I don't know.
Just indicate. But to say it louder so they can hear it.
So, actually, I have nothing to say, sir. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So, only this was, sir.
Okay,
I have
thank you.
nothing to say.
Are there any questions? Board? Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Pasang Sherpa's petition to lift the suspension of his gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Next, presenting reports and recommendations is Deputy Chief Counsel Steve Cook.
Before the board today, good morning. Before the board today are 3 reports and recommendations received from the Office of Hearings and Appeals. In each case, the board has received the evidentiary hearing or evidentiary record prior to today's meeting, and additionally, in each case, the person that is subject to the report and recommendation have been notified that the board would be taking the matter up today. If any of these persons are present and wish to address the board, they should come forward when their matter is called. The first report and recommendation pertains to Jerome Beninati. On January 26, 2017, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Beninati on the exclusion list after it was found that on August 9, 2016, while 20 years old, he attempted to gain access to the Mount Airy gaming floor using a false identification. As a result of his actions, Mr. Beninati was charged and pled guilty to carrying a false identification. He requested a hearing in this matter on OEC's request to place him on the exclusion list. The hearing was held on April 4th, 2017. Mr. Beninati and OEC both appeared at that hearing, and essentially this gentleman admitted to his conduct and just pled for leniency and cited his poor judgment. Notwithstanding that testimony, the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals recommends that he be placed on the board for a period of at least 1 year, at which time he can petition to come off the exclusion list, and that is the recommendation before the board.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and that Mr. Beninati be placed on the board's list of excluded persons for at least 1 year, at which time he may petition for removal from the list.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted.
The next report and recommendation before the board stems from a request to be removed from the self-exclusion list. Pursuant to the findings of fact in the report and recommendation issued in this matter, on January 16, 2009, an individual with the initials CW entered the Hollywood Casino and requested to be placed on the lifetime self-exclusion list. The casino compliance representative who placed CW on the list testified at the hearing held in this matter that he conducted the mandatory interview with CW in 2009 and completed all the required procedures. Thereafter, CW signed an acknowledgement form selecting the lifetime self-exclusion option. The CCR further testified that CW did not appear to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs and did not appear to be coerced in any way to place herself on the list. On January 27, 2017, CW filed her request to be removed from the list, stating that the day before, while at the Hollywood Casino, a security officer confronted her and advised her she was self-excluded. She thought at that time and expressed to the security officer that she was only on the list for 5 years and the term had expired. At that point in time, she was shown the documentation that she had chosen lifetime self-exclusion, and immediately the next day she requested the hearing to be removed. She did not, in fact, attend that hearing, so the only evidence put into the record was the CCR's testimony that he followed all of the required procedures in placing her on the list. As a result, the recommendation of the hearing officer is that she be removed. Or not that she remain on the list, I'm sorry.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the removal of CW from the voluntary self-exclusion list described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The final report and recommendation pertains to Valerie Lopes. I believe Ms. Lopes is present today. If she would care to, she can come forward this time. By way of background, on February 3rd, 2017, Ms. Lopes submitted a gaming employee permit application seeking work as a table games dealer at Harrah's, Philadelphia. Ms. Lopes disclosed on her application that she was arrested in December of 2014 for a second DUI offense after previously receiving an ARD on a DUI. And in October of 2015, she was arrested for her third DUI offense. Upon Enforcement Counsel's review of the application, they recommended her for denial based upon the nature and recency of her recurring DUI offenses. She subsequently requested a hearing, and on March 28, 2017, a hearing was held. Both Enforcement Counsel and Ms. Lopes appeared at the hearing, offering testimony and documentary evidence. Ms. Lopes testified that after being released from jail, most recently in December of 2016, for her third DUI, she entered into and completed an 8-week intensive outpatient alcohol treatment program. She also testified at the hearing that she was presently at that time in an 18-week outpatient program and attending AA meetings on a daily basis. She admitted to her problems with alcohol, acknowledged her poor decision-making, and also submitted into the record letters of recommendation from the Board of Probation and Parole, as well as one of the treatment facilities where she received treatment. After hearing all of the evidence presented, the hearing officer issued a report and recommendation recommending that Ms. Lopes be granted a gaming permit and that is the recommendation before the board. As noted, Ms. Lopes is present. I don't know if she cares to address the board or not.
Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give this morning will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes.
Thank you.
Good morning. Since the first appeal hearing, I have completed treatment successfully. I am currently working a program. I attend AA at least 3 times a week. I have a good support system, and I just look forward to working in the casino. I think I would be a great asset to the board. Casino.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Valerie Lopes' gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
That concludes matters of the Office of Chief Counsel.
Next up, Sue Hensel, Director of Bureau of Licensing.
Thank you, Chairman Barish and members of the board. Before the board today will be 677 principal, key, gaming, and non-gaming employee applicants. In addition, there will be the consideration of 17 gaming service provider applicants. The first matter for your consideration is the renewal of the Ainsworth Game Technology Limited slot machine manufacturer license. Ainsworth is an Australia-based company that manufactures slot machines. The company was first approved for a license by the board in 2007. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation of the company, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with the background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order for this entity and ask that the board consider the order to renew the slot machine manufacturer license for Ainsworth.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the renewal of Ainsworth Game Technology Limited slot machine manufacturer license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter for your consideration is that of a conditional table game manufacturer license for Kamal Limited. Kamal Limited is a manufacturer of roulette wheels and other gaming products. The company is headquartered in England. Pursuant to the board's regulations, the board may issue a conditional table game manufacturer license provided the applicant meets the following criteria: that they submit a completed application, are licensed in good standing in a gaming jurisdiction whose manufacturer standards are recognized by the PGCB, submits a written statement from a facility indicating that the facility may do business with the company, passes a preliminary criminal history investigation, and pays the licensing fee prior to license issuance. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a preliminary background investigation and suitability report for the company, and the report indicates that these criteria have been satisfied. Should the board approve Kamal Limited for a conditional license, the company has asked that the board allow it to pay a reduced licensing fee of $5,000 rather than the full $50,000 licensing fee for an initial one-year manufacturer license. Under the Gaming Act, the board may modify the fee for a table game manufacturer license if it determines that the fee will unreasonably limit table game devices or associated equipment. Consistent with this provision of the Act, the Bureau of Licensing has adopted a reduced licensing fee policy, which has previously been presented to the board. Under the policy, a reduction of the licensing fee to $5,000 is warranted if there are between 1 and 10 manufacturers of a product and the anticipated sales are under $100,000 for a 12-month period. Kamal Limited would be one of 3 licensed manufacturers of roulette wheels in the state, and its projected average yearly gross sales for 1 year are under $100,000. The Bureau of Licensing recommends that the board grant the request for a $5,000 licensing fee. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order to approve the conditional table game manufacturer license and the reduced license fee.
Thank you.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve Kamal Limited's conditional table games manufacturer license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next is the approval of principal and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 13 principal and 13 key employee licenses. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the issuance of principal and key employee licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
There are also temporary principal and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding the issuance of temporary licenses for 2 principal and 10 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the issuance of temporary principal and key employee credentials as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
In addition, there are gaming permits and non-gaming registrations. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a list of 427 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits and 187 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations under the authority delegated to the Bureau of Licensing. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the order.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the issuance of gaming employee occupation permits and non-gaming employee registrations as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Also, there are recommendations of denial for 1 non-gaming employee and 1 gaming service provider applicant. In addition to being denied, the gaming service provider applicant would also be placed on the prohibited gaming service provider list. In each case, the applicant was notified it was being recommended for denial and failed to request a hearing within the specified time frame. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with orders addressing the applicants who the Office of Enforcement Counsel has recommended for denial. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the denials.
Enforcement Council continues to request denial in each instance, and as it relates to the gaming service provider, requests that it be placed on the prohibited gaming service providers list.
May I have a questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board deny the gaming service provider and non-gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next for your consideration are withdrawal requests for gaming and non-gaming employees. In each case, the permit or registration is no longer required. For today's meeting, I have provided you with a list of 20 gaming and 3 non-gaming employee applicant withdrawals for approval. I ask that the board consider the orders approving the list of withdrawals.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the withdrawals as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, we have an order to certify the following gaming service providers: E.J. Wraith Mechanical, Inc. and Market Smart, Inc. I ask that the board consider the order approving these gaming service providers for certification.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applications for gaming service provider certification as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Finally, for your consideration are gaming service provider registrations. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order and an attached list of 15 registered gaming service provider applicants. I ask that the board consider the order registering these gaming service providers.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applications for gaming service provider registration as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
That concludes the matters of the Bureau of Licensing.
Thank you, Susan. Next up, Office of Enforcement Counsel.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel will present 24 matters for the board's consideration today, consisting of 4 consent agreements, 5 revocations, 3 suspensions, and 12 involuntary exclusions. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Category 2 licensee Sands Beth Works Gaming, LLC. This matter will be presented by Senior Enforcement Counsel Michael Rowland. Representatives for Sands are present. And at this time, I would request that those individuals introduce themselves for the record and for anyone who is not an attorney to stand and be sworn.
Michael Magazu, Magazzu, Vice President and General Counsel, Sands Bethworks Gaming, LLC.
Mark Giuliano, Chief Operating Officer, JULIANO.
Matthew Forbes, Director of Security, FORBES.
Jeff Tomlinson, Director of Compliance, TOMLINSON.
Gentlemen, if you'd all stand and be sworn at this time.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Michael Rowland, ROL A&D, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The first proposed consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Sands Casino consists of 10 fact patterns, which will address 11 separate incidents of underage gaming at the facility. Count 1. On March 1st, 2017, Sands Surveillance notified the Bureau of Casino Compliance of 2 underage patrons that were found on the casino floor. The first patron, an underage male identified as William Stanley, age 19 at the time, ran away from a blackjack table and out the casino bus exit after being asked for identification by a Sands field training officer. Surveillance footage showed that he met up with a female minor, SC, age 17 at the time, at a skate park which is directly across from the facility. Surveillance revealed that both underage patrons entered the casino through the second floor executive office hallway, which is a restricted area. The underage individuals waited until an employee was exiting through the door in order to gain that entry. 4 different employees passed the underage patrons as they walked through the restricted back of house area. They accessed the gaming floor by descending a stairwell from that restricted area and utilized the door, which is not manned by security. The underage individuals were in the back of house for approximately 2 minutes. William Stanley was on the gaming floor for approximately 22 minutes and gamed at 2 separate slot machines, while SC was on the gaming floor for approximately 21 minutes and gamed at 1 slot machine. The Pennsylvania State Police were notified and cited both with underage on the gaming floor. Additionally, Sands Security issued both underage patrons permanent evictions, and the incident was self-reported. Count 2 occurs on February 19th, 2017. The Bureau of Casino Compliance received notification from Sands Surveillance regarding an underage male seated at a table game. A table game supervisor challenged 2 males for identification. One male presented a passport for identification, and the other male presented a driver's license for identification. However, the passport and the driver's license presented by the 2 males had the same identifying information. It was discovered that minor NZ, age 17 at the time, used one of his identifications that belonged to an older brother, William Zeifert, who was age 21. NZ was on the gaming floor for approximately 3 hours and 43 minutes. He did not play table games, but gamed at 6 separate slot machines. Upon being discovered, NZ admitted that he was 17 years of age. Pennsylvania State Police were contacted and issued NZ a citation. NZ and William Zeifert were issued permanent evictions, and the incident was self-reported. Count 3.
Mr. Rowland, we have this material. If it would be possible, you could summarize this instead of going to the level of detail you're doing with all these counts.
I absolutely can.
Thank you.
Count 3 occurred in February 8th of 2017. It involved minor ES, who was age 17, on the floor for 32 minutes, gamed at 5 separate slot machines. Incident was self-reported by Sands. Count 4 occurred January 29th of 2017. Also a minor, RA, who was age 17 at the time. RA was discovered by requesting an alcoholic beverage, was on the gaming floor for approximately 1 hour and 51 minutes. Pennsylvania State Police were contacted, issued a citation. This was also self-reported. Count 5 occurred on January 19th of 2017. Individual by Georgina Mamari, who was age 20 at the time, gained entrance to the gaming floor through use of a permanent residence card. She was on for approximately 1 hour and 40 minutes, was issued a citation. Again, self-reported by Sands. Count 6 occurred on December 23rd of 2016. Jacob McCresh, who was 20, gained access through the use of a fraudulent identification, was on for 2 hours and 47 minutes, gamed at 2 separate table games, was issued a citation, again, self-reported by Sands. Count 7 occurred on December 17th, 2016. At this point, a 16-year-old identified as CR gained access to the gaming floor through the market entrance, passed security several times. She prevailed to provide identification to security when on the floor. That's how she was discovered. She was actually with her father. And the second attempt, she was found, citation issued in that case, and self-reported. Count 8 occurred on October 30th, 2016. Christiana Keko, age 20, used a fraudulent identification to gain access. She was also cited, was on the gaming floor for approximately 31 minutes. Count 9 occurred on October 1, 2016. Individual by the name of Amber Morgan, age 18. She was on the floor for approximately 3 hours and 15 minutes, gamed at 15 separate slot machines. A citation was issued, and again, it was self-reported. I'm sorry, on count 8, that was actually 2 hours and 9 minutes that she gamed. Count 10 occurred on September 25th, 2016, when Maria Gomez, who was age 20, attempted to gain access. She had previously been on the floor several times, and someone had misread her identification. That was confirmed through video surveillance. Again, self-reported by SANS. The 10 incidents, at this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the Board approve the consent agreement between the parties. The terms of the settlement include that within 5 days of the Board's order approving this consent agreement, SANS shall pay a civil penalty of $150,000 for the alleged violations described. Also, within 5 days of the Board's order approving this consent agreement, SANS shall pay the Board $2,500 for the costs incurred by OEC, BIE, and other related staff in connection with the matter. Further, SANS shall immediately review its policies and controls and provide training and guidance to its employees, which will minimize the opportunity for the occurrence of similar incidents in the future. As Mr. Petrie has mentioned, there are several representatives from SANS facility that are here, and we'll be happy to take any questions you might have.
Any comments?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, members of the board. First, we regrettably agree with the terms of the draft consent agreement as it has been presented to you, and we also ask that you approve that consent agreement in its current form. Secondly, despite the number of violations in this consent agreement and the severity of the same, we do want to assure the board and the Office of Enforcement Counsel and the people of the Commonwealth that we fully comprehend the severity of these regulatory violations, and we have and will continue to implement whatever remedial and preventative measures we deem appropriate and necessary to not only minimize but prevent these types of incidents from occurring in the future. So if you have any questions, then Mr. Giuliano and Mr. Forbes and Mr. Tomlinson will do our best to answer them.
None of these individuals have any comment other than to be responsive to a question then? That's fine.
Not at the moment.
Sure. Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the board on this matter?
I do. The comment about remedial activities that you're going to do, I'd like some description of that, please, rather than it's not self-evident.
Sure. For me personally, and I hope I can speak on behalf of all four of us when I say that I believe that the most important remedial measure that we have implemented, certainly in the 16 months that I've been with SANS, and I would argue since the time of opening, has been the advanced ID scanning system that we just installed and began utilizing in March. You may recall when we were here in January for a similar consent agreement, we represented to the board that we would have that advanced system installed and operating by the end of the first quarter. And if there is anything we are happy to report today, it is that we held to that representation, and on March 13th we began utilizing it, and it has proven to be, again, I would argue the single best improvement that we've made in this area.
Since the last reported incident that's part of this consent agreement, have there been any subsequent to that?
There have been a few. I would submit to you that they are much less severe in nature. They all, anytime a minor is on the casino floor, whatever the circumstances, we take it very seriously. So I don't want to minimize the severity of it, but we have had, I believe, a couple of incidents where underage folks were aided by relatives and had IDs where there was a strong resemblance between the person who presented the ID and the photo on the ID. And even with the best state-of-the-art technology, it's very difficult to prevent those types of entries.
It's a hard one. I concur.
So there have been a couple, and the PGCB, we always self-report them. Board staff is aware. I'd love to be able to tell you that we have a perfect record since March 13th, but that is not the case.
Other questions?
You said a few and then a couple. How many?
I think there might, just off the top, I think there was an instance of an underage vendor who entered the floor for a period of a couple of minutes before we realized he was in a place he wasn't supposed to be.
So one.
No, there have been about, I'm sorry. I
Okay.
don't want to interfere.
I'm just trying to get a number.
Yeah,
You said
there's
a few,
there's
a
been,
couple, and then you just
There's been
listed
about
just one.
3, and none of them have been gaming related. And they were all non-gaming related.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Sands Bethworks Gaming LLC as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Mount Airy No. 1 LLC. The matter will be presented by Assistant Enforcement Counsel David Tepper. Representatives from Mount Airy are present, and at this time, I request that those individuals introduce themselves and that Mr. Kletsu stand and be sworn for the record.
Just, could you state your name for the record, please?
John Koletsu, Executive Vice President, General Manager, Mount Airy Casino Resort.
Michael Sklar, SKLAR, Counsel for Mount Airy.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, members of the board. David Tepper, Tepper, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. This proposed consent agreement involves a violation of alcohol serving procedures which occurred at Mount Airy Casino. The morning of February 1st, 2017, representatives from Mount Airy appeared before the board for consent agreement regarding an intoxicated patient with the initials TS. At the board meeting, representatives from Mount Airy advised that they had since instituted a policy where if a patron consumed 3 drinks in a 1-hour period, a beverage supervisor would be contacted to assess the situation. This same policy was explained to OEC at a compliance conference which occurred in November 2017. The board approved the consent 2016, I'm sorry. The board approved the consent agreement as presented on February 1st, 2017. On the afternoon of February 1st, 2017, TS returned to Mount Airy Casino. During the time that he was at Mount Airy, TS engaged in slot play at the Glass Bar. And while engaged in slot play, TS was served 3 drinks in 3 separate 1-hour periods by 2 bartenders. At no time was a beverage supervisor summoned in violation of Mount Airy's policy as described in the testimony before the board. OEC notes that TS did not show signs consistent with visible intoxication on February 1st, 2017. OEC further notes that Mount Airy has since purchased a Bally's beverage ordering service system to prevent future occurrences of similar conduct. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board approve this consent agreement between the parties. The terms of the settlement include that within 5 days of the board's order approving the consent agreement, Mount Airy shall pay a civil penalty of $15,000. Also within 5 days of the board's order approving this consent agreement, Mount Airy shall pay the board a $2,500 fee for the costs incurred by OEC, BIE, and other related staff in connection with this matter. If you have any questions at this time, we'd be happy to answer them.
Are there any comments from Mount Airy?
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. After this most recent incident occurred, it was obviously very troubling to Mount Airy. It caused Mount Airy to take a step back and really evaluate all of the procedures that are in place with alcohol service. And the one thing that became quickly apparent was simply having this 3-drink policy and then notify a manager or supervisor. That really we're putting too much of the onus on the bartenders and the servers. That it was almost unfair that they're the ones who are required to monitor, at busy times, that they have to be the fail-safe. So I think the biggest thing, and John will go through some of the remedial measures, but the biggest thing was the purchase of this BOSS systems, which automates the monitoring of alcohol service, and it takes the human side out in large part. So I'm going to have John go through the BOSS system and some of the other remedial measures that were taken.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, gentlemen. Let me just also state that we are most apologetic of what has occurred, and I want to echo what Michael said as relates to putting the onus on a server to be totally responsible. We as a management team are equally responsible, and the BOSS system is a system that is part of Bally's technology, and it connects directly with ACSC, the gaming system. And let me just highlight some of the features of the BOSS system and what it will do. For our slot customers, they will have to have a Players Club card inserted into a slot machine in order to receive a drink. What will then occur is a server will go around on the gaming floor. They will take the order from the patron. What that will allow us to do is track the number of drinks that a particular patron has consumed on a given day. We also have the capability with the system to set time limits. And what I mean by time limits are that we can state that we will allow a patron to have a drink every 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, etc., whatever limits we so choose as the operator to have. The system will also allow us the capability to know what the guest is drinking, which is also equally important. Our drinks that are served to our guest on a complimentary basis have 0.75 ounces of alcohol with them, so obviously it's very important to know what a guest is drinking. The system also allows the ability that if a patron is playing at one particular slot machine, or he or she then does get up and goes to a different machine, the system will follow the patron, if you will. It follows their Players Club card, so we will always know if they go from one section to another section and there's 2 entirely different servers serving the patron, they can always follow that patron wherever they are based on their Players Club card. Another very nice feature of the system is that all of our shift managers, our beverage shift managers, will have handheld devices. So and it has a dashboard on that handheld device, which will allow the manager to totally see at all times what servers are on the floor, what patrons they're serving, and how many beverages they provide to that particular particular patron. The other nice feature about the system, it allows us to automatically exclude a patron from the property for a 24-hour period, 48-hour period, once again, whatever we determine. So if we shut a patron off, he or she could not come back to the property within 8 hours and begin being served again. The system would automatically ping them, if you will, and they would not be allowed to be served. Another nice feature of the system is it also has a maximum drink per day component to it, which allows us to further manage the consumption of our patrons when it comes to alcohol. So that's kind of a snapshot of the BOSS system. We are going to begin the actual implementation of the system the 3rd week of this month, roughly around July 24th. The Bally's personnel will be on property, training the Mount Airy personnel on the system over the course of the next week or two from the 24th onward. Some other additional remedial activities that we've taken as a result of this activity, once again, ramp training is sort of the gold standard when it comes to training for alcohol awareness. And in the past, we've always trained our beverage team, and we have trained our security team. We've now elevated the level of training to all of our table game and slot management teams, so they can also be very active in recognizing and know the signs to recognize when a patron maybe has reached their limits. We have eliminated the happy hour from our main glass bar on the casino floor, so we no longer have a daily happy hour. We have implemented revised alcohol service guidelines. We have recently contracted with a company called Kent, which provides monthly calibration of all of our liquor guns, so we ensure that they are properly operating. And one of the other changes, we've also implemented what we call a tag and fly system, which is a joint venture between our security department, our beverage department, and our surveillance department. And what a tag and fly does basically is when we have certain known patrons who visit the property regularly, we have noted in ACSC when they insert a card or come to the property, that will ping in our surveillance department, and the surveillance department will immediately notify security and the beverage shift manager that this patron is on property, and we have to really do our due diligence in watching this particular patron. Surveillance will also then keep a camera on that patron during the time in which they are on property. We keep a log of these particular patrons now since we've implemented this system, and it is regularly reviewed by our beverage shift management team as well as our security shift management team. So those are some of the remedial actions that we've immediately taken as a result of this most recent incident.
I have two quick questions before I see what other people have. What do you actually, you haven't put this BOSS system in place quite yet. Obviously, when you're deciding to purchase this, what do you know about the experience of this Bally system elsewhere in the country?
It is used at various properties throughout the country. Some jurisdictions use it for various means other than just, of course, alcohol awareness, because certain jurisdictions, for example, don't provide complimentary drinks to the guest on the floor, so they use it like just as equally as a marketing tool. For example, if a patron comes in regularly and he or she regularly orders a beer, you will know when Mr. Ryan comes in and has a beer one time or so. On a future visit, it will tell us that Mr. Ryan likes a Coors Light beer.
I see.
Okay, so that's one of the benefits from a
But
marketing
we haven't
perspective.
seen, do you know anything about what effect the implementation of that system elsewhere has had on problem drinking?
I can't
If you don't, it's fine.
I
I just
can't
was
give you
wondering.
specific details. One of the other benefits, though, to the system, too, from an operating perspective, is there's cost benefits to us in ensuring that we are not just trays of drinks out and providing them on the floor without having a specific order. So we look at that as a means in order to also decrease our liquor cost on a daily basis.
And the other question before I turn it over to others, just curious, what percentage, if you know, of the people who go to your casino every day are using player cards?
Are utilizing player cards?
Yeah.
About approximately 65% of our total players are rated.
Okay. Thank you. Questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Coletsu, I think you stated that the player inserts the player club card to order a drink?
Yes.
What if they don't have a player's club card?
Well, we will mandate on the slot floor that a player does have a player's club card in order to receive a beverage. Okay, that's going to be a little tough love, if you will. All right, but it's something that we're going to implement, okay, as an operating procedure, that you have to have a player's club card in order to receive a beverage. We want to make sure and ensure, too, that patrons are actually playing in order to receive this complimentary beverage, because our beverages are complimentary to our playing patrons on the floor, and I know different properties have different policies in that regard.
So after I'm off the board, if I'm driving to, see how I said that, after I'm off the board? Thank you.
Nicely done.
And I'm driving through and I stop just to play because I haven't been able to play in 6 years. And I want a drink. I have to get a Players Club card?
In order to play at Mount Airy and have a drink, yes, you will be in the future.
What if I wanted to pay cash for it?
And
instead of it being complimentary?
Okay, you will of course be able to pay cash for a beverage.
But I'd still have to.
Then we have to monitor that consumption in a more traditional fashion, if you will, as relates to our policies. And with 3 drinks, the server is to immediately notify a beverage shift manager to assess and evaluate the customer. So we will continue to proceed with our in-house policy guidelines for patrons who may be a strictly cash type customer.
Okay. And this question is just for my own personal knowledge, I guess. When I tended bar in the last century, a drink had a 1 ounce shot. Is the standard now 0.75?
0.75 is on our drinks that we provide on a complimentary basis to our guests. On a purchased drink, non out of the gun type thing, it's 1.25.
Okay, thank you. In this particular incident, since you had your new policy in place about 3 drinks per hour and the supervisor gets called, and the 2 bartenders that were serving this gentleman didn't do that, what has happened with those 2 servers?
Well, those servers were given written documentation as to their performance deficiencies. Unfortunately, in the case of one of these servers in particular, she was not really properly trained for the outlet that she was working in that day. She had on a more consistent basis been a service bartender versus in a retail bar, and had not been really comfortable and familiar with all of the policies to the degree that she should have been. Unfortunately, we did have to make some management changes, some higher level management changes as a result of these actions that took place within the beverage department also.
Okay, and my last question, and I appreciate that you've gone to this effort to buy this system and implement it and all that, but when you, not you personally, when the casino appeared before us, because I don't think you were here that day, and you expressed that we have this new policy. That was before you decided to purchase the system. Now you're purchasing the system because the policy failed. I can't help but get the feeling that you came and told us you had this policy to more or less pacify the board. Is there any, why should I not have that feeling?
Well, we have not had numerous occurrences of this type of incident. We still don't have the BOSS system in place, but I can confidently say that since this incident that occurred on early February, we have not had any reoccurrences. Our beverage shift management team has taken it personally. Obviously, our servers know the ramifications. And in lieu of just doing an annual ramp training, anytime somebody is newly hired now, they do an online ramp training course that is mandatory for them. So there's not a leeway of, let's say, 6 months or 8 months until the next ramp training class. We don't allow a server to go out on the floor without being ramp certified.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there other questions?
Just have, I guess, one question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kletsu, I think I understand all this. The BOSS system then will apply only to the 60% of card holders, and only when they're playing slots, correct?
Also with table games.
Table games
Yes.
also?
The servers will utilize the same kind of an iPad handheld where they'll take the orders from patrons, and they will obtain their card either from the patron, or they can also obtain it from the pit manager who has placed the guest information into the rating system.
And again, it will only apply when the drink is comped.
That is correct, yes.
So if a person purchases, then the traditional ways of determining
Correct.
whether a person's had too much to drink still apply.
Yes, it does.
Are there other questions?
Yes. Mr. Gletzo, I'm curious about the timing sequence where you said you can set somebody and then say, all right, you can't have one for 20 minutes or 25 minutes. Or is that per person? Is it that specific? Is it general? Obviously, we're not weighing a steel tackle versus a ballerina, something like, where I'm going with that. But how do you make those determinations? How does that work?
It would be a universal 20-minute, 30-minute, hour between drinks for all patrons. It wouldn't be significant to one individual.
That's and what would trigger that differential? What would trigger those timing intervals? Who makes that decision? How is that arrived at?
We, as the management team of Mount Airy, would determine what that number would be. Our present standard allows 3 drinks within the first hour, so that's a 20-minute basis. So, that looks like what we would initially implement into the system is a 20-minute rule, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
Just one follow-up question, if there are no other questions. When Commissioner Moscato was asking this question about comp drinks versus cash, I'd split a hair with you. If I'm on the floor and I now know, because I'm now informed, that the comp drinks are less potent, somebody comes to give me a comp drink, and I have a Players Club card, and I said, I want the 1.25 instead of the 0.75. If I'm on the floor gaming, can I pay cash on the floor, even though I have a Players Club card?
Our servers do not carry cash per se on the floor.
Okay.
The patron would have to go to the bar.
Okay.
On times, of course, we probably would make an exception in our high limit room for a patron to receive what would be called a premium beverage.
Yeah.
And that's pretty common.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, I'm a Players Club member, and I've had whatever amount of drinks I'm allowed to have on the floor comped. So I walk over to the bar, don't present a Players Club card, put down my dollars, and get a drink. That then is not going to get picked up on the boss system, right?
It would not get picked up on the boss.
I'm just trying to understand where the
No,
holes
it would
are.
not. No, it would not.
I see. Okay, so the point about paying cash presumes somebody's leaving the floor and going to the bar area if they're going to be paying cash. Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions on this?
No.
They have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Mount Airy No. 1 LLC as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a second consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Mount Airy No. 1 LLC. Once again, Mr. David Tepper will present the matter for the board's consideration.
This proposed consent agreement involves a failure of Mount Airy Casino to maintain surveillance footage. On January 7th and March 3rd, 2017, individuals under the age of 21 attempted to gain access to Mount Airy while utilizing false identification card. Mount Airy's surveillance department failed to maintain, save, or retain complete surveillance footage of either individual presenting their respective false identification cards. Prior to these incidents, in June 2016, OEC held a compliance conference with Mount Airy regarding the failure to save, maintain, or retain surveillance footage for use by the board. Following that compliance conference, a warning letter was sent in August 2016 regarding this issue, and Mount Airy was advised that the Office of Enforcement Counsel has a monetary penalty for future infractions. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board approve this consent agreement between the parties. The terms of this settlement include that within 5 days of the board's order approving this consent agreement, Mount Airy shall pay a civil penalty of $10,000. Also, within 5 days of the board order approving this consent agreement, Mount Airy shall pay the board a $2,500 fee for the costs incurred by OEC, BIE, and other related board staff in connection with this matter. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to address them at this time.
Any comments from Mount Airy on this one?
These two incidents, it was bizarre, to say the least.
That's a technical term, is it?
Honestly, we were a little baffled how this could happen because the person in surveillance, they wrote an incident report, so clearly they reviewed each of the clips, and there's multiple cameras. It's not as simple as just pulling the surveillance and reviewing footage from one camera. So it's multiple cameras, and the incident report, recites chapter and verse exactly the sequencing of what happened. So we couldn't figure out quite, and we talked to the surveillance agents who were involved. They said, absolutely, we saved it. We have no idea. So, we checked the hard drives. Clearly, it wasn't there. So whether it wasn't properly, that particular clip that is missing, just for whatever reason, human error, they didn't save it. They're apparently, it's pretty simple to actually delete one clip. So whatever reason, these, couple clips were gone. So some remedial measures were put in place, and I'll have John go through that to try to make sure something like this doesn't happen again.
Thank you, Michael. As Michael described, it's a little bit of a cumbersome process when you save clips from a particular incident. And an incident like these particular two incidents, where fortunately minors were prevented from accessing the floor, and we also do have the advanced ID detection system that we implemented about 2 years ago to keep minors off of the floor. What occurs in an incident like this, you might have as many as 10 to 15 specific clips from the incident because it is different cameras. The same camera doesn't necessarily follow the patron throughout an entire incident. So the best we can describe it as clear operator error, but obviously we need to find some remedies to ensure that it doesn't occur or reoccur in the past. So we've done a couple of things in a remedial fashion in order to ensure that it does not reoccur. And one of the first things that we've done is with our shift manager on any given shift within the surveillance department is responsible for checking that entire day's reports with accompanying video and clips to ensure they are in sync with one another. So the shift manager does that, and he or she then at the end of their shift passes that on to the departmental manager, and that is now part of his specific daily responsibilities in reviewing the clips and making sure they're called a G drive. The second thing that we have done for remedial purposes to ensure that we are saving all potential evidence is that we are taking the clips from any given day, and we are backing them up to an external hard drive. So at the end of every week, the surveillance technician is the person responsible for backing up all video to an external hard drive, which we keep in a safe within the Director of Surveillance's office. So we can then, if we have an instance where for some reason a clip of a particular incident is lost, we can go back to one of these hard drives in which we have saved all video evidence.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Mount Airy No. 1 LLC as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Next item on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. The matter will be presented by Senior Enforcement Counsel Dustin Miller. Ms. Kaufman is here on behalf of American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Miller.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, members of the board. Dustin Miller on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has a consent agreement between itself and American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. prepared for the board's consideration today. American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. is an applicant for a slot machine supplier license. This consent agreement arises from incidents of unauthorized work on associated equipment by American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. The Pennsylvania Racehorse Development and Gaming Act prohibits supplying associated equipment or displaying associated equipment on the premises of a licensed facility without the authorization of the board. On November 30th, 2016, Advanced Gaming Associates, LLC, which was at the time a board-licensed slot machine supplier, merged with American Gaming and Electronics, Inc., and the resulting entity was American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. filed an application for licensure as a slot machine supplier on January 9th, 2017. American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. did not have any interim authorization to do supplier work at that time. A subsequent BIE investigation revealed that work was done by American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. technicians on 42 slot machine bill validators for Sugar House Casino, Rivers Casino, and Valley Forge Casino Resort. Further, it was discovered that American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. was utilizing 2 in-house technicians that were not licensed by the board who were working on equipment used in Pennsylvania casinos. Those technicians have since obtained gaming permits as of May 15, 2017. As Advanced Gaming Associates, LLC no longer existed, and American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. was not properly licensed to do this type of work, a violation of the Act occurred. During the course of BIE's investigation, American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. voluntarily disclosed work done by its technicians to the Bureau of Licensing. On May 23, 2017, the parties entered into a consent agreement to settle this outstanding matter. The terms of the agreement include a provision that American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. shall institute policies and provide training, guidance, and reinforcement to employees to minimize the opportunity for a similar incident of this nature to occur in the future. And also, American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. shall pay a total fine of $7,500. American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. shall also pay a fee of $2,500 for costs incurred by the Office of Enforcement Counsel, BIE, and other related staff, which is consistent with the board's billing policy. Both the fine and cost shall be due within 5 days of the board's approval of this consent agreement. As Cyrus said, Lynn Kaufman, who's counsel for American Gaming and Electronics, Inc., is in attendance today to answer any questions you may have. Thanks.
Thank you. Do you have a presentation, or you just want to respond to questions? Your choice.
I would like to make a very short presentation. As mentioned by Mr. Miller and as set forth in the consent agreement stipulation, these violations occurred in the aftermath of the merger of American Advanced Gaming Associates into American Gaming and Electronics, and the new operation of American Gaming and Electronics as a gaming service provider, as opposed to the previous operation of Advanced Gaming Associates as a licensed supplier. This statement is not being made as an excuse for the violation, as American Gaming and Electronics is fully committed to full compliance with gaming laws and regulations and views any violation as unacceptable. However, I am mentioning it to serve as an assurance to the board that the violations occurred during a unique period of time, and thus American Gaming and Electronics is confident that the violations will not reoccur. In sum, there was some general post-merger confusion about exactly what services, products, and parts of products, particularly bill validators and parts of bill validators, could be provided by American Gaming and Electronics as a gaming service provider. Since that time, American Gaming and Electronics and the board staff have worked together and have had much communication on the topic. Board staff has provided American Gaming and Electronics with a very detailed writing which lists exactly what services, products, and parts can be supplied by American Gaming and Electronics. That list has been distributed to employees of American Gaming and Electronics. It also has been explained to them, and that dissemination of information is continuing. Additionally, with respect to the 2 unlicensed technicians, procedures have been implemented to assure that that will not happen again, and there will be constant monitoring of the technicians every time they go into a Pennsylvania casino to assure they have the proper licensure. We want to thank the board staff for working with us to become compliant in this matter. And as I say, we feel confident that these type of violations will not reoccur.
I only have one question because I've neglected to do this. Could you spell your name for the court reporter?
Oh, I am so sorry.
No, it's not you.
Lynn Kaufman, Kaufman, with the law firm of Cooper Levinson.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? If not, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and American Gaming and Electronics, Inc., as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
The next 8 matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel has filed complaints seeking the revocation of 2 non-gaming registrations and 2 gaming permits, and the suspension of 1 non-gaming registration and 3 gaming permits issued by the board. Each complaint has been filed with the board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the person named in each complaint. The person named in each complaint failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment and properly served the same upon each named person. Therefore, the facts in each complaint are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, we will provide a brief summary of the facts and requested the appropriate board action.
Good morning once again. Dustin Miller on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter today is a request for revocation involving Edward Barco Jr. Mr. Barco was employed as an EVS attendant at Sugar House Casino and registered as a non-gaming employee. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed an enforcement complaint to revoke Mr. Barco's non-gaming employee registration after he was identified at Parks Casino redeeming another patron's slot machine credits without the patron's knowledge or consent on July 17, 2016. The Office of Enforcement Counsel would ask the board to consider the revocation of Edward Barco Jr.'s non-gaming employee registration at this time.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the revocation of Edward Barco Jr.'s non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Tamara Haken, Haken, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Melissa Rooney. Ms. Rooney was previously employed as an environmental services attendant at Mohegan Sun Casino from October of 2015 until March of 2016. On February 2nd, 2017, Ms. Rooney was arrested by the Pennsylvania State Police and charged with a controlled substance-related felony and a second felony count of criminal use of communication facility, as well as 2 drug-related misdemeanors. The felony charges were subsequently withdrawn. The misdemeanor charges remain pending in the Luzerne County Court of Common Pleas. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the non-gaming employee registration issued to Ms. Melissa Rooney be revoked.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Melissa Rooney's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, members of the board. Sarah Colasar, Kolesar, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the suspension of the non-gaming employee registration issued to PG. PG was previously employed as an EVS attendant at the Rivers Casino. On August 11, 2016, PG placed himself on the board's self-exclusion list for a period of 5 years. On August 19, 2016, and January 31, 2017, PG was found gaming at the Meadows Casino while on the board's self-exclusion list. PG was arrested by the Pennsylvania State Police on both occasions and charged with defiant trespass actual communication to. At this time, OEC requests that the board suspend the non-gaming registration issued to PG.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the suspension of PG's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the suspension of the gaming employee permit issued to Bernice Lewison. Ms. Lewison was previously employed as a table games dealer at Parks Casino. Ms. Lewison is currently in violation of a special statement of condition that was placed on her permit at the time of her licensure, requiring that within 6 months of her licensure, she provide student loan documentation to the Bureau of Licensing. To date, despite multiple requests, Ms. Lewison has not provided any documentation as required by the special statement of condition. At this time, OEC requests that the board suspend the gaming permit issued to Bernice Lewison.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the suspension of Bernice Lewison's gaming employee occupation permit until such time as she comes into compliance with her student loan obligation as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Benjamin Farrell, Ferrell. The next matter for your consideration is a complaint to revoke the gaming level 2 permit of Edward Robb. On January 28, 2017, while on a shift as a table game supervisor, Mr. Robb took $100 belonging to a table games dealer and did not initially return the $100 to the dealer. Mr. Robb was not charged but did provide restitution. At this time, OEC requests the board issue an order revoking Mr. Robb's gaming level 2 permit.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Edward Robb's G2 employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter for your consideration is a complaint to suspend Marquise Williams' gaming employee permit. On March 17, 2017, the Upper Darby Police Department arrested and charged Mr. Williams with 1 count each of criminal trespass, enter structure, simple assault, resisting arrest, prowling at nighttime, and 2 summary offenses relating to allegations that he broke into a family's home under the influence of a controlled substance. Those charges remain pending. At this time, OEC requests that the board issue an order suspending Mr. Williams' gaming employee permit.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the suspension of Marquise Williams gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman, fellow board members. John Pokoneski, P-O-K-I-N-I-E-W-S-K-I, for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the gaming employee permit issued to Mark Warnes. While visiting Sugar House Casino as a patron, Mr. Warnes interfered with table games play by creating disturbance and interfering with patrons playing poker. When Sugar House personnel and the Bureau of Casino Compliance responded, Mr. Warnes acted in a disorderly and threatening manner towards Sugar House security and Bureau of Casino Compliance personnel. Mr. Warnes had to be handcuffed before being escorted off the poker room floor. At the time of the incident, Mr. Warnes was employed as a dealer at Harris, Philadelphia. In an unrelated incident, Mr. Warnes was also arrested for DUI and reportedly failed to comply with certain conditions of the Accelerated Rehabilitative Disposition Program when he did not complete his requested community service. At this time, OEC requests that the board revoke the gaming employee permit held by Mr. Warnes.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Mark Warnes' gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Michael DeSanto. In December of 2016, while working in the casino room at Presque Isle Downs Casino, Mr. DeSanto falsely processed cash transactions for his own personal benefit, thereby depriving Presque Isle of revenue and Presque Isle employees of tips. The estimated value of the 41 falsely processed transactions by Mr. DeSantos equals to a total of $205. At this time, OEC now requests that the board revoke the non-gaming employee registration held by Mr. DeSanto.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Michael DeSanto's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The remaining 12 matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel has filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals whose presence in a licensed facility are inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and are licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in the petition. The individuals named in the petition failed to respond within 30 days as required by Board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each named individual. Therefore, all facts in each petition are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the Board, and the matters are presently ripe for the Board's consideration. In each instance, if the Board orders a proposed exclusion, each individual's photo, personal identifiers, and a summary of the inimical conduct will be placed on the Board's public website.
Next matter for the Board's agenda is a request to place Gabriel Solomon on the involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Solomon used false identification while underage in an attempt to gain access to the gaming floor at Sugar House Casino. At this time, OAC requests the Board add Gabriel Solomon to the Board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the Board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board approve the addition of Gabriel Solomon to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Mr. Solomon may petition for removal from the list after 1 year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter for your consideration is a petition to place Glenn Holmes on the involuntary exclusion list. On April 4th, 2017, Mr. Holmes left his 10-year-old son and 1-year-old daughter in his vehicle unattended for approximately 30 minutes while he gamed at Valley Forge Casino Resort. On April 4th, 2017, the Upper Marion Police Department arrested and charged Mr. Holmes with 2 counts of child endangerment, 2 counts of reckless endangerment, 1 count of intentional possession of a controlled substance, and 1 count of leaving an unattended child in a vehicle. On April 19th, all charges, with the exception of the possession of a controlled substance charge, were dismissed. The remaining charge remains pending. At this time, OEC requests of the Board issue an order placing Glenn Holmes on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the Board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board approve the addition of Glenn Holmes to the BGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the Board. John Crowe, C-R-O-H-E, for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter before the Board is a petition to place Ryan Karpovich on the Board's excluded persons list for entering the gaming floor at Mohegan Sun Pocono on 2 separate occasions while only 18 years of age and gaming. Mr. Karpovich was charged by the Pennsylvania State Police and pleaded guilty to 1 count under the Act of Unlawful Gaming under the age of 21. The Office of Enforcement Counsel now asks that Mr. Karpovich be added to the Board's excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the Board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board approve the addition of Ryan Karpovich to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Further move that Mr. Karpovich may petition for removal from the list anytime after his 22nd birthday.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Glenn Stewart for the Office of Enforcement Counsel, S-T-U-A-R-T. Next for the Board's consideration is the placement of Al Davis on the Board's involuntary exclusion list. In March of 2017, Mr. Davis forcibly took $60 in gaming chips from the dealer's rack while wagering at a Spanish 21 table at Harris, Philadelphia. Mr. Davis then cashed out these chips at the cage and attempted to leave Harris property. Mr. Davis was apprehended before he could leave the property, and he was subsequently charged with 1 count of theft by unlawful taking. On June 6, 2017, this criminal charge was withdrawn. The Office of Enforcement Counsel now respectfully requests the Board issue an order placing Al Davis on the Board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the Board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board approve the addition of Al Davis to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next matter for the Board's consideration is the involuntary exclusion of Mohammed Al-Hafari. As a result of Mr. Al-Hafari using an illegally manufactured identification to access the gaming floor at Rivers Casino while under the age of 21. As a result, OEC requests that the Board issue an order placing Mohammed Al-Hafari on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the Board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Mohammed Al-Jafari to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Mr. Al-Jafari may petition for removal from the list any time after his 22nd birthday.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the involuntary exclusion of Aaron Mansfield. On January 17, 2017, Ms. Mansfield was part of a group of 3 individuals who caused a disturbance at the Rivers Casino by refusing to leave after she and her group were asked to do so. For her part, Ms. Mansfield hid on the gaming floor while security personnel attempted to escort her out, kicked the elevator door and wall, poured her water bottle out in the elevator, threw a water bottle cap at an unknown patron, attempted to punch an elderly female patron, made several attempts to engage in a physical altercation with security, and was verbally hostile towards security officers. Ms. Mansfield was arrested by the Pennsylvania State Police and charged with criminal mischief, defiant trespass, disorderly conduct, and public drunkenness. As a result, OEC requests that the board issue an order placing Aaron Mansfield on the involuntary exclusion list.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Aaron Mansfield to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter for the board's consideration is the involuntary exclusion of Grace McCune. As a result of Ms. McCune using an illegally manufactured identification to access the gaming floor at Rivers Casino while under the age of 21. As a result, OEC requests that the board issue an order placing Grace McCune on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Grace McCune to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Ms. McCune may petition for removal from the list anytime after her 22nd birthday.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter today is a request for placement on the board's excluded persons list involving Eva Derma. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Ms. Derma on the exclusion list due to incidents that occurred on July 11th and 12th, 2016 at Parks Casino, whereby Ms. Derma cheated while playing blackjack on 8 separate occasions. Ms. Derma was criminally charged for her actions. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asked that the board place Eva Derma on the board's excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the addition of Eva Derma to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter today is a request for placement on the board's excluded persons list involving Jenny Nguyen. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Ms. Nguyen on the exclusion list due to incidents that occurred on October 8, 2016 and January 1, 2017, whereby Ms. Nguyen cheated while playing Pai Gow tiles on 3 separate occasions at Parks Casino. Further, Ms. Nguyen had been involved in 5 other incidents at both Parks Casino and Sugar House Casino that resulted in her being ejected from those facilities. Ms. Nguyen was criminally charged for her actions on October 8, 2016. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asked that the board place Jenny Nguyen on the board's excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Jenny Nguyen to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next on the agenda is a request to place Devin Flores on the involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Flores used a false identification card while underage in an attempt to gain access to the gaming floor at Mount Airy Casino. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add Devin Flores to the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Devin Flores to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Mr. Flores may petition for removal from the list or 1 year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next item on the agenda is a request to place Scott Grinley on the involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Grinley used a false identification card while underage in an attempt to gain access to the gaming floor at Mount Airy Casino. At this time, OEC requests that the board add Scott Grinley to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Scott Grinley to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Mr. Grinley may petition for removal from the list after 1 year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next item on the agenda is a request to place Daniel Volpe on the involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Volpe gained access to the gaming floor at Mount Airy while under 21 for approximately 6 hours and 39 minutes and placed wagers at slots, Spanish 21, and blackjack. Mr. Volpe was not asked for identification when he gained access to the gaming floor, but was identified as underage when he attempted to cash out at the cage. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add Daniel Volpe to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Daniel Volpe to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Mr. Volpe may petition for removal from the list anytime after his 22nd birthday.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
That concludes our business. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to announce that the board, the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board, will be holding a public hearing on the licensure of the Stadium Casino project on July 31st, 2017 at 2 p.m. in this room. This hearing follows is the result of a decision of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court remanding a portion of that decision back to us for further consideration. So our next public session, next public hearing will be on July 31st. That doesn't change the rest of the schedule. We will then return again on August 9th for our regularly scheduled session. Are there any other final comments from the board at this time? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for your time.